You know, we hear companies talk all the time about their commitment to diversity, but how do we get past the promises and see some actual proof? Today, we are digging into the nitty-gritty metrics that show what's really happening inside a company. This is the data that puts their commitment to the test. Let's get right into it.
So let's just start with that big question. Whether you're an investor, an employee, or just a customer, how can you actually measure a company's real commitment? It's definitely not about some mission statement they put on their website. It's about data. And even more important, it's about having comparable data so you can see how companies really stack up against each other.
And that's exactly where having a common language becomes absolutely essential. I mean, think about it. For any of this to be meaningful, everyone has to be reporting the same stuff in the same way. This is the whole idea behind standardizing this kind of corporate reporting. So who's creating this common language? Well, a really key player here is the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board, or SASB for short. Now, they're part of the IFRS Foundation, which is a huge deal in global financial reporting. Their whole goal is to create a clear, simple framework for companies to report on all things sustainability. Okay, so what exactly are these SASB standards? Basically, they're a set of 77 different rule books, and each one is specifically tailored to a single industry. But the most crucial phrase here is financially material. This means the standards are laser-focused on sustainability issues that can actually impact a company's bottom line. It's what bridges the gap between social goals and real-world business performance. To see how this works in practice, let's just take one industry, retailers. They have to report on all kinds of things, from their energy use to how they handle data security. But the topic we are going to zoom in on today is right there in the middle: workforce diversity and inclusion. All right, we've set the stage. Now let's narrow our focus and really get into it. We are going to unpack exactly what the SASB standard requires when it comes to diversity and inclusion reporting in the retail world. And listen, this isn't some abstract, high-level corporate topic. This standard applies to the places a lot of us shop at all the time: department stores, big box retailers, those home goods shops, and warehouse clubs. So the data we're talking about has a direct link to the brands you know and probably buy from. So what do these companies actually have to report? Well, the standard boils it all down to two simple but incredibly powerful metrics. These two things are the absolute core of what they have to disclose. The first metric answers a really fundamental question: who is working at the company, and, this is the important part, in what kind of roles? It's all about the actual composition of the workforce, from top to bottom. Now, the standard is pretty smart about this. It doesn't just ask for one big company-wide number. It forces companies to break their workforce down into these three specific tiers. You've got the top dogs, the executive management, then you have that middle layer of non-executive management, and then everybody else. And this is so important because it stops a company from hiding a lack of diversity at the top by just hiring a lot of diverse employees in entry-level jobs. And here is what the actual table looks like that they have to fill out. For each of those three tiers we just talked about, companies have to report the percentage breakdown by gender. They also have to report the breakdown for what they call self-identified diversity groups, which could be based on race, ethnicity, or other things depending on the region. It's just a clear, simple snapshot of who's at every level. Okay, now for the second metric. This one moves away from representation and gets into consequences. And it speaks a language that every single business understands: money. This is it. It is incredibly direct. Companies have to disclose the total dollar amount of monetary losses they paid out because of legal proceedings that had to do with employment discrimination. This isn't some estimate or a guess. It's a hard number that shows the real financial price of getting this stuff wrong. And the scope here is really comprehensive. The disclosure has to include money lost from lawsuits related to all kinds of discrimination: age, disability, race, gender, you name it. It makes sure companies are being held accountable across the entire spectrum of what fair employment really means. So there you have it, the two metrics: who works where and the financial cost of discrimination. But what's the real-world impact of having this data just out there in the open? Why does this kind of transparency actually matter so much? Well, this quote, which is taken directly from the standard summary, pretty much gives you the answer. The people who created this standard argue that this transparency isn't just a chore, it's a huge benefit. Being open about this can actually improve a company's reputation, and by focusing on these things, it can reduce their legal and financial risks down the road. So let's just end on a final thought here. Imagine for a second if this data, this clear, standardized report card on diversity and discrimination, was right there on every company's price tag, easy for all of us to see. If you knew the real numbers behind the brands you love, would it change where you spend your money? That's the real power of standardized data. It puts the information in our hands, and it lets us decide what truly matters.